Hello everyone and Happy New Year. Almost. Today I'm going to be doing something I've never done on this channel before. Reveal my top 15 favorite roller coasters. Now keep in mind, I have only been to so many theme parks. I haven't been to Cedar Point or Kings Island. We tried to fit it in this year, but it just didn't work with our scheduling. Or any of the Universal parks outside of one visit to Universal Studios Hollywood in 2018 that I barely remember. I have been to 3 Disney parks, including in Paris, but none of those coasters made it into this list, unfortunately. In total, I've been on 107 coasters, and these are the ones that I like the most. Anyway, let's start on the list. These are my top 15 favorite roller coasters, 2025 edition. Coming in number 15 is an unfortunately defunct coaster that I still miss very much to this day, Nighthawk. Carowinds' underrated flying coaster that was unceremoniously massacred at the end of 2024 during that big coaster purge they did. You know, the one where they killed off King Dakar, Green Lantern, Nighthawk, Lava Bora, and Anaconda in one fatal swing. I remember it too. Unfortunately, that's the last thing I remember from 2024. But anyway, I digress. Nighthawk was honestly one of my favorite roller coasters ever when it was still operating. From what I remember, it wasn't even that rough, and sitting in the front row the loop gave this very strange airtime-like feeling. But it wasn't really airtime, more of a stomach drop feeling. I honestly really miss this ride, and I hope whatever replaces it is something worthwhile like a tilt coaster in the style of Siren's Curse. Alright, this might turn some heads, but here we go. At number 14 is Loch Ness Monster at Busch Gardens in Williamsburg. This coaster is honestly the main reason I'm such a big fan of aero rides as of now. They're just so janky and imperfect that I just can't help but love them. This ride isn't even that rough, but it's still very much intense. The 2 vertical loops provide decent forces, and the helix is the only real rough part of the ride. The drop is actually pretty floaty, and even though there's a trim on the second drop, it really doesn't take away from the ride that much. Overall, Loch Ness Monster is a classic, and I'm very happy to have ridden it this year. At lucky number 13 is Dominator, King's Dominion's relocated B&M floorless coaster. Originally opening at Geauga Lake in 2000 as Batman Night Flight, Dominator was relocated to King's Dominion in 2008, and unfortunately it shows. This coaster is not the smoothest, however, it is still very much a fun ride. The drop is seriously whippy in the back, and the loop provides some unbelievable hang time in practically all rows. The high-speed turns after the loop are pretty fun, and so is the Cobra Roll, even with it being the worst one in Virginia, in my opinion. I feel like the roughest part of the ride is honestly the ending, with the corkscrews and the final turns. But it's not enough to ruin the ride. Overall, Dominator is a really good looping coaster, and in my opinion, the best and smoothest B&M in the park. At number 12 is the only coaster from the now defunct Six Flags America to make this list, Superman Ride of Steel. Now I will say, this coaster was significantly better than what I was expecting when I rode it last year. Everyone talks about the straight track, but no one talks about the borderline RMC level airtime on the hill after the straight track. This was also one of the only 2 coasters I've ever gotten the Zen ride on, the other one being Pantherian. Technically, I was riding with my dad for this one, but we were the only ones on the train, so it kind of counts. I'll count it. The pure silence during the straight track was probably one of the funniest and calmest moments I've ever had on a coaster. I really, really hope it gets saved, but in the event it doesn't, rest in peace, Superman Ride of Steel. You will be missed. Alright, are you guys ready for some controversy? Here we go. At number 11 is Carowinds' criminally underrated aerodynamics looper, Carolina Cyclone. I think at this point, for this ride at least, I've gotten tall enough to where my head doesn't bang on the restraints anymore. The last time I rode this in early October, yeah, it was a little rough, but not uncomfortable at all. I can handle roughness. Just look at Grizzly and Flight of Fear, both of which are in my top 10. Spoilers, never mind. Carolina Cyclone has 4 decently intense inversions, a pretty good drop, especially in the back, and a nice chill helix to end out the ride. Plus, it rarely gets aligned, so it's extra re-rideable, at least for me. Coming in at number 10 is Copperhead Strike, Another really good coaster in Carowinds' lineup. Honestly, this ride was my number one at one point before I rode Fury and Thunderstriker, and this just goes to show how much I still like it. The hang time and airtime combo is unbeatable, and it has some really good positive G moments as well. Though there is a very slight rattle, it's gotten a bit better. The launches may be weak, but everything else on this ride is great, and I look forward to riding it every time I go. And number 9 is Flight Deck, one of the most intense coasters I've ridden. Located at California's Great America, Flight Deck is an inverted coaster with multiple leg-numbing moments. Specifically, the first helix gave me a hard gray out and reminded me a lot of Pantherian's first turn. The inversions, especially the corkscrew, were all pretty whippy and forceful. Sadly, this and the next one on the list are both closing at some point in the near future. And even worse, I think the next one stings even more than this one for one specific reason. My 100th coaster is taking the spot of number 8 on this list, Railblazer, also at California's Great America. Even though I only got to ride this coaster once, it was still such a good ride, even off that one ride. It wasn't even in the back row, and I still thought it was great. The entire ride basically. The restraints, which are a typical complaining point with this model, were not that bad to me, and overall, when I hit the brakes, I was in pure shock at how intense and flat out. I was in pure shock at how intense and flat out crazy it was. Like Superman, I really hope this gets moved somewhere, but from what I've heard, it probably can't due to the welding. Which if that's the case, rest in peace Railblazer, you too will be very missed. It's time to get twisted with the number 7 spot on this list, Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. Frankly, one of the most demented coasters I've ever ridden, and I don't say that lightly. This thing throws you around so much that it's frankly quite insane. The Triple Airtime Hill Special has to be one of my favorite coaster elements ever. It honestly may be too much. The barrel roll drop is unhinged, but it just gets more unhinged from there. This is still one of my favorite roller coasters ever, and is so close to being at number 6. But I finally decided the order literally when I was writing the script. Barely beating out Twisted Timbers for the number 6 spot on the list is the coaster right next to it, Grizzly. Now, much like Flight of Fear, which, spoiler warning, is coming up soon, when I first rode Grizzly in 2024, I wasn't that blown away. Obviously it was good, but not as good as I was expecting. Fast forward to Passholder Preview 2025, and I don't know what they did to this thing, but it was running absolutely ridiculous, with some of the best airtime I've ever experienced on a ride, even close to rivaling Twisted Timbers. The drop is still the third best drop I've experienced on a coaster, only behind Pantherian and Fury 325. This ride is a classic, and I hope it stays at the park for a long time. Here's yet another ridiculously underrated coaster at Carowinds. Just barely making it into the top 5, it's Thunderstriker, my favorite B&M hypercoaster. And you know what? I think I owe this ride an apology, frankly. Usually when I talk about which ride to feed my fear of coasters, I credit it to Fury 325, but no, it was this. I say that with full confidence. After riding this for the first time during CoasterCon 45, I wasn't scared of Fury at all. I've never, ever, not ridden a coaster due to fear since. Except Max Force. But I digress. Back to Thunderstriker. I don't get the hate for this ride at all. Okay, obviously the trims do hit. Pretty hard, in fact, but do they take away from the ride? No. Is the Helix really forceless? No. Does this ride have one of the worst names on Earth? Yes. But the ride itself is the same, whether it's themed to Dale Earnhardt or not. Overall, Thunderstriker is a great ride that is unfortunately slightly overshadowed by its bigger brother on the other side of the park. However, I still very much like it. Now here's a ride that actually benefits a lot from being rough and jerky. At number 4 is Flight of Fear, quite possibly the most controversial placement on this list. Even more controversial, since I significantly prefer this ride over Joker's Jinx. Go ahead, throw the tomatoes, I don't care. I really don't care. The queue is really creepy and adds to the mood. It honestly feels like a haunt maze when you're all alone. The station is really cool with the whole spaceship aesthetic and ambiance that still manages to get me nervous every single time. The trains aren't really that bad, but I can see why some people might not like the shin guards. They're no problem to me, though. The launch is easily the best part of the ride and really scares the people still waiting. After the launch, the first three inversions all hit really hard. The Cobra Roll, while not the best one I've done ever, it's still the best one in the park in my opinion. That, followed by the Sidewinder, is an incredibly intense sequence that absolutely glues you to the bottom of your seat. After, there are some slow turns that lead into the mid-course, but after the mid-course, it just gets crazier and crazier until the final corkscrew at the end. The final few turns literally feel like they're trying to tear the train apart, and it absolutely hurts, but in the best way possible. Truly an unbelievable ride experience, and one that I can't wait to get back on again in the spring. And number 3 is Alpengeist, the best B&M invert I've ever done, located at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. Now, going in, my expectations were set pretty high, as with the next two coasters on this list, but Alpengeist seriously blew me away. I was a little worried that the quote-unquote roughness in the Cobra Roll snaps would ruin the ride for me, but funnily enough, it was actually my favorite part. I don't really know why people think it's rough. I've been on much worse coasters that are significantly rougher than this. For example, that one jungle-themed launched wing coaster that opened this year in a park not too far from here. You know which one. Anyway, back to Alpengeist. When I first wrote this, I was frankly in pure shock at how intense it was. This is easily the most intense coaster in the park. Griffin and Apollo's Chariot are kind of graceful, and Pantheon was a bit underwhelming. But Alpengeist checked all the right boxes. I think that it will very likely stay in my top 5 B&Ms for years to come. Coming in at number 2 and earning the silver medal is Pantherian, the ride that is constantly changing places with Fury 325 in my rankings. Hopefully, if, and when I go to Cedar Point and Kings Island next year, I can get a definitive number 1, because every time I go to Carowinds or Kings Dominion respectively, the rankings always change. Pantherian is easily the most intense roller coaster I've ever done. There's no doubt about that. The restraints aren't that bad, honestly, even though they do kind of get a lot of flack. I find them decently comfortable and secure. The first bone-crushing turn makes me gray out so hard every time I ride it. I'd even go as far as say as it made me gray out more than it did last year somehow. More this year than last year. Somehow, I don't know how. The fast, snappy transitions are good as always, and even though there is a nasty trim, I can honestly look past that. This is my second most ridden coaster, only behind Fury 325 at 33 rides. And speaking of Fury 325, here it is. Here's the greatest coaster I've ever done. Fury 325 at Carowinds. When I first rode this coaster during CoasterCon in June 2023, I was immediately hooked. I had been scared of this thing for years, and I finally decided to just do it. Best decision of my life. This ride has held up for me still after all this time, being my most ridden coaster at 80 rides. Over 80 rides, at least 80 rides. You'd think I'd get bored after a while, but no, this ride is genuinely incredible. The drop is the best drop I've ever done. The Hive Dive Treble Cliff thing is easily the best element on the ride, and the hill finale is always fun. The only real dead spot on the ride is the massive helix. But at least there's that one near miss support during it that makes it fun to go through every time. Overall, Fury is just incredible. It's fast, intense, the ups are great, and it's such a fun ride, and I can't wait to get back on it this summer. And with that, those were my top 15 roller coasters I've ridden. Did you agree with this list? Did you disagree? Tell me all those thoughts in the comments below. It's been a great year, and I can't wait for all the new parks I plan to visit next year. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in 2026.